Well, good evening to those of you who are watching right now. We're going to hang out here for a couple of minutes until people start connecting with the link and getting the Zoom call ready and all that. So I guess I'll be your entertainer while we wait. So tonight we have an amazing speaker that I will introduce in a moment, but let me get to that in just a sec. So I was kind of joking because the speaker is me. So I'll do my own introduction and I'll be your MC, your speaker, and your tech guy all in one. You know, those multifunction machines that they sell today. Well, I feel like one of those this evening. So welcome everybody. I know there's people out there from many places right now, invited by our team, our friends on the Alpha team here at St. Anne's. So I'm very happy to welcome all of you. And while we wait, we can do a little tour. I don't know who is connected right now because YouTube doesn't give you that much information about you, which is great. Otherwise, it would be kind of creepy. But we have the well-known Table 9 legacy, which is Maria del Carmen and Laura and Amanda. And I know there's a lot of guests there, but I don't know exactly how many of them are online right now with us. Then high five there to Pablo and Diana. I think you might be in Texas by now. And I know there's many people out there in Mexico, Colombia, other places in the US. A big hi to Mercedes too. Mercedes and Belen and Lucas and Isabel, Santiago and Aline. Welcome to all of you. I'd like to give a special welcome to Hayden and Alejandra and their online Zoom meeting. I know there's a few people from St. Anne's and Peter, you're there. That's amazing. I hope Laura, you're connecting with us there as well. I also would like to welcome. Did I mention Christian already? Okay, I hope I did. Christian and Jose and friends. Welcome to all of you, Mariana, and your band, your gang there. Very welcome to all of you, Jane and Buddy, and I think Brian. Brian, you might be in with Hayden actually. So we got a bit of a shared space there. Jane and Buddy, welcome. Giovanna and your family at home, Vicky, and also those with you. Very glad to have all of you guys. Yeah, I know it's great. We're kind of scattered and we cannot communicate in between tables, but hopefully you're having a great time at home and sharing some good snacks. So while we prepare for this broadcast, the live stream for today. Okay, you may see me juggle a bit tonight and not be super comfortable with some things, so bear with me. I have to handle tech and studio and talk at the same time. So let's see how this is going. Okay, so we're almost on time. We'll just give it a couple more minutes and to get started, okay? Maybe I can do a bit of the intro time now for me so that we make good use of the wait. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Father Lucas Laborde. I was born and raised in Argentina. I joined my order, the St. John Society, from the beginnings of this community in the 90s, and I was ordained a priest in 2005. And I came to the U.S. as one of the first men of the St. John Society to come up here. I lived for many years in Oregon on the West Coast, and I've only been here in D.C. for the last couple of years. I did grad school here at Catholic U, so I'm familiar with the city, but I'm kind of newer to the area, and so St. Anne's and this community has been like a new thing to me, and it's been amazing. So I'm very, very happy to journey with all of you. Yeah, and this is so we have a lot of experience with the Alpha course. Our society does a lot of evangelization or outreach, just trying to connect with people who may not have that experience of Christ in the church, because that's my story. Okay, that's a bit of my story. I grew up without a sort of very living faith, if you want. I wasn't very connected with the church at all. So that's why I feel a special way. I can relate to people who are in that situation, that they may not have a lot of familiarity with religion or not feel very warmly about it. So I think that's a kind of what we do a lot with the society. And so we have a lot of experience with Alpha, We've done the Alpha courses in many, many countries, in places, I mean, four countries, but different cities there, in Uruguay, in Argentina, in Italy, and the US, primarily in the West Coast. So we do programs with college students, with high school, with adults. We go to very poor areas as well, like slums and very poor neighborhoods, and even prison ministry in some cases. But in all of them, trying to share the word of God and trying to help people connect with God and also with one another. Okay, having said that, I'd like to welcome all of you who are listening to this live stream tonight, and we'll dive right into our topic. Okay, I hope this goes well here. Okay, let me see. So, there you go. This is what I'm not making right. There you go. Hold on a sec. There you go. Okay, I think now I'm getting it. Okay, I hope you can hear me okay. Should be all set up with my camera on one side and the PowerPoint on the right side. Okay. So thank you for your patience there. So welcome to the second session of Alpha. So tonight we're going to talk about the title you see there, why would people want to be Catholic? And the reason I say this is because I myself, love being a priest, and I'm very passionate about the Catholic faith. But there was a time, as I was telling you in the intro, in which I didn't quite enjoy the faith. I thought anything about church was quite boring and uninteresting, and so I didn't really want to go to church. I remember at one point when I was a kid, Pope John Paul II was visiting Argentina. My mom said to me, "Hey, let's go and see the Pope that is going to drive by with the Pope mobile." And I was watching TV on the floor, and I said, "Who cares about the Pope? Can't you see I'm watching my favorite TV show?" So that's kind of where I was. I didn't care for religion at all. And I think that the challenge that a lot of people have with religion, with Catholicism, is about perception. Maybe it's not about deep reasons, but primarily it's about a way they feel about it. Maybe they sense, as I did, that it's something boring and outdated and not very exciting. And in some cases, they may sense it as controversial and bigoted and tainted with scandal. So obviously, there are a lot of answers we can give that can be given in favor of the Catholic faith. We can explain a lot of arguments, and we will go to some of those arguments in the upcoming sessions of Alpha. But before we go into those reasons for the mind, I like to speak about the reasons that speak to the heart, to our sensibility, to the way we perceive and feel about things. Because what I like to argue tonight is that being Catholic makes a lot of emotional sense. That actually, there's a reason why people can be drawn to the Catholic faith. That's what explains why so many people every year enter the Catholic Church. That we run something called RCIA, and a lot of people come to become Catholic. I was very impressed when I asked one of my brothers here who is doing RCIA now, who is joining the Catholic Church or applying for that. Oh, he said, there's 3 AU students who are coming online, right? And I was impressed, and I said, how come? And we never met them in person. They're somewhere else in the country. And I said, yeah, but they just emailed me and told me, hey, we're coming to you. We want to be Catholic. And I said, how? I don't know. The Holy Spirit works in amazing ways. And somehow people who are not even met each other, they're taking these steps without you inviting them. I learned a couple of years ago that this lady, Princess Alexandra of Hanover, entered the Catholic Church. So it's not something that appeals only to, you might think, well, people who are struggling, who are going through rough times, but also people who are apparently doing very well in life, like this lady who is an ice skater, a figure skater, and she's from the nobility in Europe. She's a princess of Monaco, the granddaughter of Grace Kelly. And even though her dad is Lutheran and taking this step would kind of maybe put some tension with her father, and actually she lost the succession to the throne of England by taking that step. This 19-year-old, now 21, took this step 2 years ago to become Catholic. So the question you might want to ask is, well, why do people do this? And going ahead of me from this reason, why do people care about this or are drawn to the Catholic faith? So that's what I'd like to explore. And let me give you a number of reasons or ideas why. The first one, which you saw there, is that the church is universal. There's a universality of the faith that is very fascinating in the Catholic Church in particular. The Catholic faith brings together people from very, very different backgrounds, from very different, social classes, cultures, situations in life. You have, children and married couples and older people and, professionals, farmers, you name it. When you go to, if you ever had the chance to visit LA, something amazing there is the cathedral. Well, you can actually go online and watch that, but the Cathedral of LA has these amazing tapestries of the saints. It's a kind of newer rendering of the different saints. Instead of being each one of them looking at you with their halo, all of them are kind of facing the altar, and they're also mingled, right? They're also together worshiping with you. These tapestries represent the communion of saints, and I wanted to share some of those because I find them quite fascinating. And you see, I think you have people from Asia like Paul Kim Tae-gon, and I think you have maybe one of the bishops there. I don't know if it's St. Augustine or someone. Children, a sister, young, acolyte there. And look at these. I think it's St. Bridget of Sweden here on the left side. St. Martin of Porres there, St. John Vianney. But that's, when you go online, you can actually watch each of the names, but it's amazing, this great blending of different cultures, different ages, different backgrounds, paths in life. I think on the right side there you have St. Perpetua and Felicitas, which is amazing, and then St. Andrew and St. Peter Claver, who worked with the slaves in Colombia, and I think Bonaventure. Well, it's amazing. I love those tapestries because they show us this universality of the faith, this diversity that we have. Obviously, as a Catholic, you belong to a church that has a lot of identity. It's not that everything goes, right? It has a clear identity, but it's not like joining this elite club, with only these kind of people, the right kind of people belong. Or it's actually people from this culture, Yeah, I mean, if you're a princess from Monaco like Alexandra, then you might fit. No, it's for Alexandra of Hanover and for people in the slums in Brazil and for people in Africa and for workers in China and the US, for anyone, anybody, all ages. Something that I've seen also firsthand myself when going to the World Youth Day, for example. I had the chance to go to the World Youth Day in Madrid in 2011, and it was amazing to see, literally, it was like 2 million people, young people, cheering and praying together in such a peaceful way from all over the world. I think you could watch the map, and there was almost no country that didn't send some young people to the World Youth Day. I was blown away that even Iran, I think, had some people going to, I don't know how many Catholics are in Iran, but they went. And I think there's a reason why. There's a reason why this happens, that the Catholic faith, the faith that comes from Jesus Christ, speaks to the core of the person. It's not about this or that culture or this or that education. It speaks to the very spiritual core of people, and so it can take elements from any culture to express that. It's not exclusive to one culture. Quick story about a friend that we know, Kevin. He was a young man deployed. Well, he was in the Navy here in the U.S. And at one point he went to United Arab Emirates. He was in Dubai, in the Middle East, and he wanted to go to Mass on Sunday. And he said, well, he asked, there's few Catholic churches, so he found out that online that it was in this neighborhood, kind of out of the way. So he took public transportation and he began to walk. And as he walked, he began to notice people walking along, but streams of people, like lots of people. And he said, it's not possible that all these people are going to mass. It's like a crowd gathering, right? And eventually, when he got there, it was humongous. He says he couldn't believe it. It was like, because there are so few parishes, everybody goes there. There's masses from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All of them count for Sunday mass in that location. And this is what he saw. This is actually a picture of the entrance of that parish in Dubai. I think it's a Mary Catholic Church in Dubai. You can actually check it online. You can fact check me if you want. But this is what it looks like on a given Sunday, and there's masses like every hour, because people. And he said it's amazing. I suddenly was worshiping these Filipino people and people from Eastern Europe, and I was from the US, and we're all Catholic, in a Muslim country. So that's the first element that I think appeals, is very fascinating, the universality of the faith. A second aspect is this one of social justice. I think we have this because of believing in Christ, who died for each one of us, for each person. We have this very high concept of human dignity. People are not like cogs in a machinery. Each one of them has infinite value in the eyes of God. And you have this great infinite value in the eyes of God. And this is a message that comes from Jesus himself, who reached out to the outcasts, who cared for the lepers, for those who were shunned, or people like begging on the side of the road. And he made no distinctions. He met with Nicodemus and people who were very important, like Joseph of Arimathea, and with simple, fishermen and people in his town. He emphasized. We get a clear sense from him that every person is called to be a child of God, right? And this is something the church carries as a tradition, not only in the ideas, right, but also as in the actual work of helping people, of doing a lot of things. For example, the idea of the image of the missionaries of charity of Mother Teresa of Calcutta comes to mind. The sisters who do so much for the poorest among the poor, for those who are dying on the streets or in very difficult situations. A few months ago, right before the COVID pandemic, we had a chance to go on a mission to New York City with our students here at American University. And we visited many of the houses of the sisters there. Like, they have a house in the Bronx where they have a men's shelter. They have a house in downtown Manhattan where they have people who are dying, like especially ladies who are terminally ill. And it's amazing. Nobody knows a lot about the work they do. It's kind of hidden, but it's a consistent, constant way in which I think that the love of God is poured throughout the earth for people who are suffering, and I'm pointing out to them, but there's so many people who help people in need, right? But I think this is something that the church does in an amazing way. Kind of my journey of faith began had a lot to do with going to people in need. When I was very young in high school, and I was kind of starting to pray again and to go back to God, one of the first things I did was go to the hospital and visit people who were sick there, and that was so eye-opening, to be in contact with people who were suffering and to visit with them, to pray with them, just to listen to their stories. It was eye-opening, and I should share more about this another day. I don't want to go too long, but it's amazing. And it was not just, I think, good for people to be visited, but it was also good for me to exercise that mercy. It kind of opened my eyes and transformed me in a way. The church challenged me to be merciful, to care for those in need, and something I would not have done on my own. I've also seen how, in the sense of social justice, faith has the capacity to bring about social reconciliation. People who are maybe in different places, when they may not have a very compassionate heart, they change. There's a story of a man called Charlie in Argentina, who is a lawyer. He and as he began his career, he told us later in his testimony, he had a sort of tough heart towards people in prison. He sensed that people there, had created a lot of suffering, and they deserve to be punished, and there should be no kind of mercy for them. And eventually he had a conversion through the Alpha course, something like what we're doing now, and he began doing prison ministry. He was invited by some friends who were doing that. And initially he said it was really hard. He says it was so hard for me to think of that I would go to a prison and what would I find there. And then he says it was very transforming. He began to listen to their stories and realized, yeah, they have some responsibility in what they've done, but also they were dealt a very bad cards, to begin with in many cases. And so he began to develop a lot of compassion, and something kind of clicked and changed inside of him by doing that. Especially when he realized that these people, these inmates they were visiting, how they began to really change their outlook on things through faith. Like really, the grace of God had the power to soften them, to show them that there was hope for them, right? And that really gave him hope, and he kind of changed his mind on that. Okay, I hope I'm not going too fast. I tend to be a very fast speaker, but the third reason why I think people want to be Catholic is because it brings us a key solution to a very profound human problem, and it's we might call it the human propensity to mess things up. I mean, I think we all have this great propensity to just mess things up, and by things I don't mean, my studio things or my computer, but I mean like people, relationships, careers, and especially relationships. We do things that really harm our connection with other people and cause a lot of pain and damage, and at times it seems to be irreversible, right? And so it can ruin, family lives and marriages and a lot of good things, and we suffer from that. And through faith, something I've seen consistently is how people who start to grow closer to God, they improve their capacity to relate and to be healed or forgiven. How they start to find solutions to these problems. They become more stable in their human relationships. A phrase I found that I like a lot from Father Giussani. He says, loneliness is not about being alone, but to live without finding any meaning to your life, right? It's like life cannot be communicated and really shared when there's no meaning. And it's something that I think finding deeper meaning in Christ is also something that enables us to connect more deeply with other people and find forgiveness. Let me tell you a bit quick story here, but I got to meet this couple of many years ago. They're called Jesse and Joe. And when I met them, their relationship had a lot of uncertainties. I was inviting this man, Joe, to another type of retreat, similar to Alpha, but kind of different. This couple they had lived together for 9 years. They were not married. They had no children. And the relationship was very difficult because he had a very unusually hard upbringing. He was a child, Joe, who had been abandoned by his parents, or somehow he ended up being raised in a farming community that basically farmed drugs. They grew marijuana and cocaine and coca, and so this was in South America, right? So he was raised without a sort of family, but grew up in this community that was basically like a sort of narco community, so to say. And so when he came to the age of reason, and he realized, no, I don't want to live this kind of life, and I know where this is heading. So he planned his escape, and he escaped. He ended up being homeless for some time. But as someone who, I don't know, was gifted with a good heart, tried to come out of that, he eventually could get a job, start, as a young man, started work, and then he got into this relationship with Jesse. He had been given some faith, but had really little idea of the Catholic faith. And so we invited him on this retreat through a friend of his who invited him, and he's a very friendly, guy. I think this upbringing made him very fragile in many ways, but he also was very open, very friendly in many ways. And but it was hard for Joe to really bond with people. He was very friendly, but he only let you into a certain degree, and that was also been a great wedge in between him and his partner with Jesse, right? So they were not sure whether they would stay together or not, and they were struggling and fighting at times, coming back together. But so he went on this retreat, and it was a huge transformation. Like, he was so happy. You could see this huge smile in him and this peace in his eyes, which he says I've encountered the love that I had never had in my life. I never knew that there was someone who cared for me so much as God, and somehow, in spite of all I went through, he's there for me, and he wants to call me his child. And so he began to work on Jessie, right? So Jessie didn't want to go on the retreat. She was stubborn. She says, no, I don't buy into any of that religion stuff, Jose. So they kept inviting her, and finally Jessie said yes the next year, and she went, and also she went through this very profound conversion. A year after that, they got married in the church. They celebrated their wedding. I was the one celebrating their wedding, and then she got pregnant and had their first child, who is now maybe 5-6 years old, I guess. And you can see what an amazing couple they become. From being quite not sure they would stay together, they really become very, very close and very loving. So much so that, let me add a story to this. When they, from the time he was away from God, Joe had this very difficult, at times difficult relationship with people who were working with him. He works in landscaping, and he had this big fight with this one guy who was really tough also. And so the supervisor ended up firing this other guy because he didn't want to have him there and have all this conflict. Fast forward, when Joe and Jessie are now converted, in another company, they hired the same guy again, right? And placed him in Joe's team. And so Joe suddenly says, oh no, this guy Luigi that I hated, it happens that he's now in my team, and I had to bear with him. And so he was just super angry and frustrated. So he calls Jessie on the phone and says, Jessie, you're not gonna believe this, but guess who is now working with me? You don't remember the guy I told you many years ago, this awful guy? He's back, and he's in my team. And so he was so angry. And Jessie said, Joe, a Catholic doesn't react that way. We have to love people, even people who have been mean to us. So Joe thought for a moment and said, you're right. And so he began to be patient with this guy. This guy was kind of barking at him, and he says, well, okay, yeah. By the end of the week, this guy Luigi comes to him and says, Joe, you've really changed. There's something different about you. And Joe says, yeah, you know what it is? Actually, my wife and I have found God in a new way. And in fact, we'd like to go to your home, to your family, if you don't mind. We'd like to share with you what happened to us. So he arranged a meeting. Jessie and Joe went to this man's house, met his family, and began to share how God had transformed their lives. Well, this man also came on the same retreat that Joe had been to, and now you see them going together to church. Now, when in the community I was part of before, they are both walking together, and they're good friends now. And it's amazing. You see the hearts of enemies changed now into kind of good brothers. Something that you don't see very often, right? And I'm totally convinced it happens through faith, through the presence of God in their lives. Okay, let me get going, because otherwise it's going to be too late. The fourth thing the faith gives us is meaning and spirituality. So spirituality is about finding a deeper connection with who we are, our identity, and also obviously with God, and a sort of deeper sense of what's the meaning of the universe, of this life that we are living through, right? It's understanding who we are. And it's always, I think we need to know that there is an overarching story, that we're not just, living in a meaningless universe, but we come from something, and we come from a personal being that loves us, and we have a destination, right? And that provides us with strength to bear the cross. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but actually the whole story that is so popular, The Lord of the Rings, and they made the movie out of the books of Tolkien, have a lot of Catholic undertones, because Tolkien was a Catholic, was a very convicted Catholic, and he wanted to create a sort of mythology for England. But in doing so, there's a lot of Catholic undertones in what he wrote. For example, the image that Frodo is like an image of Christ who bears the cross, right? He's bearing the ring that he has to destroy. He has to kind of cast that ring into the fire to destroy it. But the main thing that I find fascinating is this constant sense of divine providence. Like there's like an invisible hand guiding the story, right? And bringing people together, and there's a sort of purpose. You know, there's a fight there against evil for a sort of good purpose. There's a meaning and a sense of adventure behind it all. And I think we all of us have questions. We all wonder, why am I here in this world? What am I doing? Does my life have any meaning, any sort of transcendence? Will anybody in the end care for what I do? What I spend my energy and time doing? Well, in Christianity, in Catholicism, you find a very definite and very positive response to that. And I'd like to share with you a quick testimony. Let me see if I can pull that up. Okay, here we go.
Well, I'm Sally Reed, and I'm 41, and I live near Rome, but I originally am from England and mostly London, which is where I lived for a long time. And I was a psychiatric nurse in London, and I stopped psychiatric nursing to write poetry, really, and to get an MA in creative writing. And I've published 2 books of poetry. And until 2 years ago, I was a very committed atheist, and I really hated the Catholic Church. It was one of my defining points. And then about 2 years ago, I had an incredible conversion, and I converted in 2010. My conversion came about in various stages. First of all, as a writer, I was writing a book that's actually about to come out, in the voices of psychiatric patients, whom I'd nursed 10 years ago. And these patients have Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, their parents have been killed in the Holocaust, they have depression, they're anxious. And I had to find a way of finding their voices and making them speak. And as I was writing this book, I became very aware that I didn't know where the soul was, and I didn't know if the soul existed. And it was really driving me crazy. When I was trying to give speech to a man who had Alzheimer's and he had no memory, didn't know his own name, had no life, then I couldn't locate where he was anymore. And that was driving me nuts, literally. And so while I was talking to this priest about, is there a God, and all of that kind of stuff, I suddenly had this feeling as a poet that God was the ultimate poet and the ultimate creator, and I was simply being used as an instrument. And it was at that point, it was kind of an intellectual thing. And I contacted the priest and I said, I don't think I'm an atheist after all. I think there might be a God. And he was like, oh, okay. And I said, but, why would I be a Christian? I might be a Hindu. I could be a Sikh. I could be a Muslim. Christ just didn't come into it. And he was very patient and very good. And he just said, well, Christ will convert you. I'm not going to convert you. And he said, pray. And I'd never, ever prayed. But when I went to pick up my daughter from school, she's at a convent school, and there's a church attached to the school right by the sea. And every day I would go to the school to pick her up. And I should interject that this period of my life was turning everything I'd ever believed in upside down. And it was very, very difficult. I mean, I wasn't sleeping at all. I was very, very emotionally traumatized, really. It was like I couldn't stop listening to something other than myself. I mean, I'm a psychiatric nurse. I can say absolutely it wasn't a nervous breakdown and it wasn't psychotic, because I understand what those things are, but it was the most disrupted period of my whole life. And so I'd stop at this church, and I wouldn't exactly pray, but I'd sit there, and just one day I was just in tears, and I was looking at this icon of Christ, and I said, if you're there, you have to help me. And this thing happened, which is very hard to explain, but I felt as if I was being physically lifted up, and my tears just stopped, and I felt this absolute presence, and it was so tangible. It's so hard to put into words because everything sounds like a cliche, but it was so utterly, utterly tangible. I knew then that my life was devoted to Christ. There was nothing else. So then I was a Christian, but I wasn't a Catholic. And then the Catholic Church was when I realized that there is only one church, and the way to be closest to Christ is to be a Catholic, because it's the Eucharist and it's taking communion. So the whole process took from March to December, and I was received in the Vatican in December. So it was a bit of a lightning flash. You do go through a stage of intense euphoria, which is what people tell you when you first convert. And I certainly had that period of intense euphoria, but the happiness has never left me yet, even though being a Catholic is has its challenges and calls you to account for things that you're not called to account for as an atheist. You have to live your life a certain way, and there are difficult decisions to be made. I'm still happier than I've ever been. I really am, because life without God is extremely difficult. I remember one friend said to me, when I converted, she's a Catholic, and she said, as an atheist, how do you deal with death? And I said, it's not the concept of death that's a problem for atheists, it's the concept of life, because I found it tremendously hard. And I don't so much anymore. It is hard, life is difficult, but when you understand what it's about and you understand what's arching over you, then, I don't know, it just has brought a lot of comfort.
Okay. Okay. Okay, hope you can see me okay. I think I lost my PowerPoint though. Oh my goodness. There you go. Okay. And final point here is relationships. Is the I think faith is very attractive because it fosters a deep relation. Sorry, I think I forgot. I want to mention something, but just to wrap it up, the video we just saw, Sally Reed, which I think is an amazing testimony. I think just to emphasize what she said at the end, that when you have this overarching meaning above you, then that gives you strength to bear any challenges, right? And I think that's also very something I find very enticing or attractive about having faith and knowing God is there. Okay, finally now to number 5 is relationship. I've encountered in my own experience that faith enables you to develop very profound and stable relationships. If you want the topic, the point I made before about the key solution, that's more referred to myself. Like I can experience forgiveness and find that I can now do things better and be more functional in society and find healing. But this one is more related to finding good friendships, finding good family life, finding meaningful connections with other people that otherwise would not be there. And I mean, that's definitely been my case. Before walking in the faith, I had a fairly good life. I was doing good in school and sports and such, but I can say that the quality of relationships that I developed because of believing in God and walking more deeply into my faith, it's amazing. It's like going from like a black and white, gray scale to color. It's been a very amazing transformation in that sense. It doesn't just foster that because it gives you that capacity, it also actually brings people together in an amazing network of communities. For example, don't cease to be amazed at you guys at Table 9 with John Drago and all the group there. It's amazing. You see that constantly, through things like different ministries, works of mercy, and it also brings a lot of healing to families and relationships that are somehow been through rough times. Something I'd like to conclude with is this story, a sort of testimony also how this is the case. It comes from this British man, a writer and journalist who was for many years, he was very, very much anti-faith. He was very anti-Catholic and anti-Christian. And he was, he had also a sort of change of heart and change of mind in this. And he says the following, recently he said this in an interview a few years ago. He says, "For much of my life, I have been one of those who did not believe. I have grown up in a culture that is overwhelmingly secular and anti-religious. The universities, broadcasters, and media generally are not merely non-religious, they're positively anti. It felt so uncool to be religious. With the mentality of a child in the playground, I felt at some visceral level that being religious was unsexy, like having spots or wearing specs. My belief has come about in large measure because of the lives and examples of the people I have known, friends and relations that have lived and faced death in the light of the resurrection story, or in the quiet acceptance that they have a future after they die. The Easter story answers their questions about the spiritual aspects of humanity. It changes people's lives. That is why I now believe in it. The resurrection is the ultimate key to who we are, but an even stronger argument is the way that Christian faith transforms individual lives. Well, when you see someone so kind of convicted as an atheist and so much against faith, and such an intellectual person, realize that through the testimony of people, well, that's something to listen to. To conclude and wrap it up, I think many of you may have been exposed to different bad experiences in the faith, and I understand that. In a case, in a mild way, I also went through that. I had a very poor catechesis. It was absolutely boring, not a lot of content. I wasn't never exposed to really great role models of faith. I wouldn't say I suffered any scandals, but definitely didn't have super great figures of faith when I was a child or a teenager. And I was kind of bored whenever I went to prayer and church, but that didn't keep me from finding all these good elements as well. Whenever, when God in his time kind of guided me through good people to discover his reality, his love for me, that was still possible. So maybe even if you've been through some negative experiences in faith, I think there still remains all these many attractive elements in the Catholic faith, and you can still receive them, you can still experience them. So that's our invitation with Alpha. So now I'd like to show you some questions here for discussion, and give you some time for you to just discuss with your Zoom group or people you're gathering with right now. And this time we won't do a general, like a wrap up, like a sort of general closure, because that was kind of difficult to accomplish last time. So I'll just give you time. Take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, how much time you need, and then you just wrap, each table or group will wrap it up on their own, okay? So I leave these questions up here on the screen, and I look forward to seeing you, or at least that you will see me 7 days from now. Until then, God bless, and hope you have a great discussion with your group.